This is draft season. The 2024 NFL Draft is in the books. It's all brought to you by Moody's. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Visit Moody's.com to learn more. I am John Schmeelk, joined as always by Tony Pauline from Sportskeeda, where you can find all his written work. And by the time this is up, I'm sure there'll be something on there about a draft recap from Tony. So make sure you go check that out. Hey, Tony, we're going to recap the draft here. We're going to try to touch on all the teams in some way, shape, or form if we can. But we'll go through guys that fell, guys that maybe went a little high. We'll go through teams we liked, teams we didn't, and we'll try to get to as many teams as we can here as we recap the 2024 NFL Draft. And this is not our final episode before we take a little hiatus. Tony will have his 2025 watch list coming your way in the second week of May. That'll be our final episode before our break until the end of August. So, Tony, just give me your overall take here. We're finally at the end of the process. You've gone through a ton of these. What does it feel like for you to have a year of work kind of in the books now as the 2024 NFL Draft is all wrapped up?
I think the most fun part or the best thing is when I plug in a guy, like as we're going through the draft tracker, I'm plugging in what selection they are. And when you get down to like 179 or 180, and it's actually the guy who was the 180th selection in the draft is actually the 180th guy on my board, I'm quite happy. Of course, when the 138th player on my board is the 65th player selected, I'm like, well, somebody's wrong here. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start there, Tony? You and I were both a little surprised about some of the guys that fell in this draft that we weren't expecting. Why don't we go back and forth here? Why don't you go first with your first guy that you were a little surprised fell a little bit?
Well, I think you got to go with A.D. Mitchell. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to be a first-round pick. He ends up in the late part of round two to the Indianapolis Colts. By now, Chris Ballard's rant is a little bit viral, but I don't agree with Chris Ballard. There's a reason why A.D. Mitchell fell as deep as he did, and a lot of lesser-rated receivers were selected before him. And the fact is he didn't interview well. There were a lot of questions about him. He really hasn't improved his game since his freshman season. And every time I watched the film and I expected more, I kept going back to that freshman year at Georgia to justify, okay, he's a late first-round pick. But I think it was a combination of the poor interviews and the less than expected results on the field is why A.D. Mitchell fell into the late part of round two.
Yeah, I agree with the concept in general from Chris Ballard with unnamed sources and stuff.
Right.
Put your name on it. I agree with that. But A.D. Mitchell is also a player. And I love A.D. Mitchell. I had him as a borderline first round guy here. So I'm a big A.D. Mitchell fan. But when he outright says in public at the combine that I didn't run hard on plays, I didn't think I was getting the ball. That's not anonymous sources. That's the guy saying it at a press conference. Those are two very different things. All right, I'll throw two wide receivers out there, Tony, just to kind of stick with the wide receiver. I know you have another one as well. That's really low-hanging fruit that I'm 100% behind, but I'll let you take him. I was surprised Devontae Walker got to the fourth round. I thought that was a little tardy for him. I thought he was more of a third-round pick. And then Malik Washington going all the way in the sixth round. Now, I think he found a really nice landing spot in Miami. I think he's going to do well in that system. But for a guy that was so productive, I know he's a little short. I know it was only 1 year of production. I thought he could have snuck into the fourth or fifth round.
I think with Malik Washington, I mean, remember the whole story. He had to come back to North Carolina because he didn't want to be away from home, so he had to be closer to home. I think that's a concern for some teams. He ends up with Baltimore, I mean, which is very close to home. So it was a great pick by Baltimore. Hopefully Walker's okay with it. As far as the Virginia receiver, I mean, he's explosive. He's incredibly quick. He's a great route runner, but he's 5'8". And I think a guy like that, if you watch, I mean, Taj Washington, was still on the board. Those shorter guys seem to have gotten pushed down a bit.
You're right, and then you have a receiver that to me went way too late. But I'll let you start, and then I'll pile on.
Yeah, I mean, Troy Franklin going in the fourth round. I made calls. I tried to figure out why he went so late. Somebody told me his pre-draft process, specifically his combine workout, really wasn't up to par. He was there at 173 pounds. He didn't catch the ball well, and they were concerned about that. And you have to be careful because when you watch the film on Troy Franklin, he plays like a top of the second round prospect. He doesn't play like a fourth round prospect. He catches the ball well. He catches everything. He catches things in crowds. So if it is true. And the reason that precipitated Troy Franklin's fall was a bad combine, 173 pounds. When he had the flu, he came back at the pro day. I think he was 178 at the combine. Came back at pro day, was 184, and he didn't catch the ball well in the gauntlet. That is a dangerous thing. You've got to are you basing your grade and your decision on what the guy did in shorts and a t-shirt at the combine workout catching the ball, or are you watching 2 years of outstanding film, or are you going to base it on 2 years of outstanding film on Troy Franklin? Regardless, he was great value in the fourth round.
Yeah, and he wound up with his college quarterback in Bo Nix with Denver. So I think that'll work out well for him, and it'll work out well for the Broncos. And Tony, this is not me taking a shot at the Commanders, but I think the Commanders, and they'll be in my list of teams that I thought had a really good draft. I cannot fathom when I did my wide receiver rankings having Luke McCaffrey. And I like Luke McCaffrey. I think he's a chance to be a good player. But just picking him ahead of Troy Franklin, I can't wrap my head around that in any way, shape, or form.
Especially since, I would say that Franklin's as good a route runner and he catches the ball as well, and McCaffrey's not as fast. So I completely agree with you.
Okay, I'll go here. Peyton Wilson, Tony, he landed to the end of the third round. Now, there's no mystery as to why this happened. Obviously, it has to do with the injuries. He had all those surgeries. He doesn't have an ACL in one of his knees, according to a lot of the reports on NFL Network during the draft coverage. But look, even if he's a one-contract player, Tony, to get him at the tail end of the third round in a pick in the 90s, even if he just gives the Steelers 5 really good years, that's a heck of a pick.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. I mean, there comes a point with a guy like that where the reward outweighs the risks, and the risks are completely medical. We've known about him for a while. I talked about it at the Shrine Bowl because they said there were going to be some major concerns there. His teammates even said there were major concerns. But at what point in time do you say, listen, the reward is greater than the risk? And the Pittsburgh Steelers have had experience with this type of player that didn't have an ACL. And again, he looks fine on film at North Carolina State the past 2 years. But what you're looking at, and I've said this time and time again with the medicals, can they get to the second contract? Well, we'll see if Peyton Wilson defies those odds and gets to his second contract.
You have another defensive play here, Tony, one that I was also surprised dropped as far as he did.
Yeah, Jaden Hicks, because in the lead up to the draft, everyone thought that Jaden Hicks was going to be the first safety taken, especially after his pro day workout when he ran in the 4.46, when he ran 4.46. Now, I somewhat understand it because he's a bit of a tweener, 211 pounds. And when you see Hicks, he's very good in a straight line, but he's not great sideline to sideline. He doesn't have the range that Bullock of USC has. So you're basically looking at him as a zone type downhill safety that you can't play in traditional center field. Maybe you put a few pounds on him and you move him up the field to linebacker. I still think he went much later than he should have, but I understand why he fell a bit.
All right, and then I'll wrap up this part of the show with two guys, Kingsley Suamataia, Tony, dropping to the end of the second round. I think from a talent perspective, I didn't have a ton separating him from guys like Jordan Morgan and Tyler Guyton. So I was surprised he got down there as far as he could. We thought the Chiefs might take him with their pick at the end of the first round. They got him with their pick at the end of the second round. So I thought the Chiefs, had a really good draft, by the way, and they got good value there. And then I'll throw Cooper Beebe in there, who I had a second round grade on him. Sounds like the Cowboys are going to play him at center. He's going to be a walk-in starter for them on the offensive line, and probably they'll have him plugged in there for 10 years.
Couple things. Suamataia, I had known the story in the lead up to the draft, and I was struggling where to put him. His own people told me that he could end up as a late second-round pick. There were a lot of maturity questions about Suamataia. Evidently, the story that I was told by people close to him was he pulled himself out of the last regular season game at BYU. He didn't want to play in that game. And BYU, I believe they needed to win that game to have a chance to get in the Big 12 championship contest. He pulled himself out. He said he had an injury. BYU really cheesed off at him. And the BYU coaches basically threw him under the bus. So this was a possibility. They were preparing him for this possibility because the BYU coaches really just did not gave poor reviews to NFL coaches and NFL scouts. And when that happens, that's a bad thing. That's why he fell the way he did.
And just to be clear, so people don't come at you, Tony, this isn't you reporting
No.
that he took himself out of the game and he wasn't hurt. You're just telling the story that was told to you.
By his people. So it's not like some by his people who I know very well, and I went asking where in late in round one he was going to go. I thought at the time the Dallas Cowboys could take him, and they were like, he may not go in the first round. He could go anywhere. He could go as deep as the 55th pick, and then the story was laid on top of me. So it's not someone that had an ulterior motive here. It was his own people, but you know what? He ended up in a great spot. He ended up because he's going to be a starter there. And, if he just grows up and gets a little mature, he's going to be an outstanding tackle at the next level. Cooper Beebe, I think it was the combination. I love Cooper Beebe. Well, 31-inch arms, and he does 20 reps on the bench press. That's, bench press really doesn't mean that much, but when you are a shorter arm guy and you play that brand of nasty football, it's just not a good combination.
All right, Tony, we try to keep it positive here, so I don't want to make this second list too long here, but guys that we were surprised how high they went. I'll lead off here. Just given all the off-the-field stuff that happened with him and the weight issues, I was surprised Devondre Sweat remained in the top 40. Like, if you look at his tape, I get it. He's that good of a player. I was just surprised that he was a high second-round pick to the Titans at 38.
The weight issues, the off-the-field issues, the partying, I was absolutely shocked that he went that early. I mean, because there was talk that he may not even be a second day pick. He may fall into the fourth round. I was surprised that Caden Wallace was a early third round choice. The Caden Wallace, the Penn State tackle, who was a 68 selection. I liked Caden Wallace a lot off the 2022 film, but I thought he struggled a lot last year, and I thought he really hurt himself last year. He's got the size, he's got the upside, he's a terrific power gap blocker. But I thought off of last year's film, especially compared to his junior tape, I thought his draft stock had fallen. Obviously, I was wrong.
Two guys at the I'll even give you three just real quick, Tony, top of the second round that I was surprised. And I'm a big fan of this player. I like him a lot. I was surprised that Rook Ororo went ahead of Jerzon Newton by a pick. The Falcons trading up to get him. Again, really good athlete. I think he has a lot of great future ahead of him, but ahead of Newton was a surprise. I thought Jalen Polk was a tad early for me.
Yes.
Over other wide receivers like A.D. Mitchell, a guy you mentioned in the previous segment. And then I would thought that Kamari Lassiter, given that 4.6 at the pro day, I thought 42 was a little bit rich for him. Again, all good players. I thought they were all going to be day 2 picks. I just thought top 42 picks, maybe a little rich.
Do you think I'll disagree in the sense that with Lassiter anyway, because Lassiter ran 4.6 to 4.55, but he plays fast and he's constantly around the ball, where Polk, while he's a good receiver, is more of a contested catch guy that I think should have been taken in day 3. I think I'm going to break your heart when I mention one of your guys. I thought Renardo Green of Florida State was taken a bit early.
I was so happy, Tony, that my second round grade on him got justified by the league. I couldn't tell you how happy I was.
Here's the thing is he's got terrific size, he's got terrific speed, but even when they were showing the highlights after he was selected, he's constantly face guarding. They show these great plays that he's making, but he's playing the receiver's hands, which leads me to believe that you better put him in zone, or there's going to be a lot of receptions made against them.
I thought, I know it was a need for them. I thought they had a great draft. Otherwise, I thought Marist Liafau out of Notre Dame was a little bit early for the Dallas Cowboys. They'd done a round 3 as well.
I was getting third round grades on him. In fact, I had him as a third, fourth rounder in the lead up to the draft. So I mean, the thing with him is he's intense, he's instinctive, and then he had a terrific workout, had a terrific combine, had a terrific pro day, and people really started to fall in love with him. In fact, I informed his team that I was getting third round grades on him. I will say this, not that he was taken too early, but I am happy to see that where Jermaine Burton went, the receiver from Alabama, because I had him as a third round. I was hearing about these character issues about him, but he's a terrific receiver. He's a vertical wideout with room to grow, and he catches the ball very well. So I think that's a guy that a lot of people thought may have gone a little bit earlier than expected, but I was happy to see it.
Yeah, Tony, I thought without the off the field stuff, I thought he was a second round talent, to be totally honest with you. And with, we'll see what happens with T. Higgins, maybe one more year there. He could easily just step in and be the second wide receiver there. He could be their starting slot in week 1 for all we know, given his skill set. So I agree.
I got to give you two more guys that I
Yeah,
thought
please.
went much earlier than they should have. Number one, Mason Smith of LSU, mid second round choice. I mean, Mason Smith's best football was 2 years ago, and when you watch, and he was injured last year. But when you watch him play this year, it was sort of that AD Mitchell. Yeah, if he's not involved in the action, he's not playing very hard. Once blocked, stays blocked with Mason Smith, which was a concern for me. And
Yeah,
once he
actually,
was
Tony,
blocked,
I guess his best play then was 3 years ago, right? Because he missed all of
right,
2022,
two,
played in 23, so his best ball was in 2021.
3 seasons ago, right? 2 years
Yeah,
ago is what I said, right? So
yeah, yeah.
2 years as far as 2023 is what I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
Once blocked, stays blocked. The other guys, I thought, listen, I was rooting for this guy, but I thought Max Melton in the middle of round two was way too high because again, Max Melton was a guy who, when you watched him as a freshman at Rutgers, I thought, wow, this guy's going to be a first round pick. And then his game kind of leveled off, even regressed a little bit. I didn't see any improvement in his game. And rather than seeing a consistent shutdown cornerback at Rutgers, I saw a guy who showed flashes, a guy who did a lot of face guarding, incredible athlete, great upside. But I thought the middle of round two was very early for Max Melton.
And by the way, we've talked about why this happened, but I thought Jackson Powers Johnson was great value for the Raiders at 44. I thought he was a first round player. We talked on previous episodes why he dropped Tony, whether it was personality stuff, injury stuff, whatever the post draft process that people got worried about with him. But I thought at 44, I think he's a really good player, and he's going to be a big help to the Raiders. Don't forget, draft season brought to you by Moody's. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Visit Moody's.com to learn more. All right, Tony, I'll let you lead off. What was one of your favorite draft classes that you liked this year?
I got to go with the Chicago Bears, who literally, before the draft even started, they were winners based on the fact that, they had the first pick of the draft based on that incredible trade last year. Then they get Caleb Williams. I mean, there's probably some risk there. It's not a guarantee, not because of Caleb Williams, but because of the fact that, it's the quarterback position, and you never know with the quarterback position. They come away with Rome Odunze, 8 picks later. So not only do they get, they're hopefully the quarterback of the future, they get the player that, the quarterback is going to be throwing the ball to. I think getting the Yale offensive tackle in the third round was good value. If Kieran Amadagaji had played the season, had performed at the Senior Bowl, as most people thought, you're looking at an Ali or possibly an Ali Marpet type of small school lineman who could have gone in the second round. Austin Booker in the fifth round was terrific value, an outstanding situational pass rusher. And I thought that Torrey Taylor, where they took him in the fourth round, the punter out of Iowa, was great value. I think that Torrey Taylor, the punter from Iowa that the Bears took in round 4, is going to be an opening day starter for the team.
All right, I am going to cheat here, and I'm totally okay with that. I think the entire NFC East, Tony, did very well in this year's draft. The Cowboys needed 2 starters on the offensive line. They got one in Tyler Guyton. We'll see how he adjusts to the left side. That is going to be a factor here, and maybe it's going to take a year, but I think long-term he's got the skills to do it. Cooper Beebe, we already mentioned, he's going to be a plug-and-play starter for them on the inside. He has to transition to center. He practiced there, never played there. We'll see if it works. I thought Marshawn Nealon was a good value for them in round 2. We already talked about Liafau as well. I thought, need and value met pretty well for them. I thought the New York Giants did well with Malik Neighbors. They got a starting safety in Tyler Nubin in the second round, a guy they think they can start at corner, and Andrew Phillips, a high-end tight end, a high upside tight end in Theo Johnson, who in that Penn State offense didn't have a chance to show that athletic ability, but he will in the NFL. Then you have the Commanders, who had high volume. I mentioned I wasn't a huge fan of the McCaffrey pick, but Jaden Daniels, Jerzon Newton, and I know they already have 2 tackles that are good. I get that, but he was the best player left on the board at that point. Then they got Mike Sanford still, who I really like. I know some people thought Ben Sinnott was a little bit rich in round 2. I had a second-round grade on him, so I had no problem with that. He's going to be a plug-and-play starter at tight end. Brandon Coleman is kind of a high-upside offensive lineman, guard tackle flexibility, and then Luke McCaffrey. So the Commanders had a lot of picks, Tony, and I think they took pretty good advantage of those selections. And then finally, the Eagles. Look, They get Quinion Mitchell late in the first round. They get Cooper DeJean early in the second round to rebuild that secondary. That's great. Jalix Hunt is a, you know, flyers maybe the wrong word, but a developmental young defensive end that, you know, can kind of play in that Hassan Reddick role for them. And you know me, I love Will Shipley, and they got Will Shipley late. And the addendum here is, Tony, they added 3 picks in next year's draft. And in next year's draft, for the first time in a long time, the Eagles are slated to have no compensatory picks, but they picked up 3 picks, including a day 2 pick in various trades they made up and down the draft over the last 3 days. So I thought the Eagles did a pretty nice job as well. I thought the whole NFC East got much, much better today.
I do like what the Baltimore Ravens did. I usually like what the Baltimore Ravens do every year, so that's not a surprise. I was a little bit hot and cold on Nate Wiggins, but the fact that they got him at 30, I think was a solid choice. I love the selection of Roger Rosengard, the offensive tackle from Washington, late in the second round. I was told that they're pretty happy what they have at right tackle, but I think at the very least, Rosengard will compete for that starting job, or they can kick him inside the guard. I thought Adisa Isaac, late in round 3, another terrific pick, perfect fit for their system. They needed an edge rusher. He's a guy who I think will be moved in and out as a rookie and could have developed into an every down defender. Devontae Walker in round 4, I thought was great value. We talked about that. TJ Tampa, the cornerback from Iowa State. I think TJ Tampa in round 4 is actually better value than Nate Wiggins in round 1. Long, athletic, does a great job making plays with his back to the ball. I think Rasheen Ali in the 5th round, the running back from Marshall, is a phenomenal complementary ball carrier to add to the Derrick Henry signing. So, you know, again, for a team that is just looking for a few pieces and a few breaks to get to the next level, I thought they came away and they did a great job.
Yeah, and look, they somehow figure out a way to just sit there and pick, and like TJ Tampa's there on day 3, and Devontae Walker's sitting there on day 3. The way that they can just somehow sit there and just wait for really good players to fall to them, Tony, it's really unbelievable. I want to highlight a team in their division. I thought the Steelers had a wonderful 3 days. Talk about understanding what you want to do as a franchise and drafting players to fit that identity, Tony. I thought they did that beautifully with their draft. They rebuilt their offensive line in one fell swoop. Round 1, Troy Fautanu, guard or tackle, doesn't matter. I imagine he's going to be a tackle for them. Zach Frazier, walk-in starting center. Mason McCormick's one of my favorite in round 4. I think he's going to be a starting guard for them. We talked about Peyton Wilson as a steal in round 3. Roman Wilson in round 3, I think, is good value, Tony. I think he's going to fit right into that Deontay Johnson spot with him getting traded to Carolina in the offseason. And I like Logan Lee out of Iowa. I think he can be a pretty good upfield, versatile defensive lineman that can move around a little bit. I thought the Steelers picked to their personality. I think they got some really good players in there. They fit some needs. And I just think, you know how the Steelers want to play, and this draft was just like a big exclamation point on the type of players they want and the way they want to play the game.
Yeah, Lee's got to get a little bit stronger. I mean, Roman Wilson, you know, a Hines Ward type of player.
A blocker. He's a blocker too.
The interesting thing about Fatano is we're going to have to wait and see down the road. Did they looking at the rest of their draft, and it's kind of tough to do it because I'm sure they didn't. I know they didn't think Zach Frazier was going to be there in the second round, but watch Quinton Mitchell with the Eagles versus Fatanu with the Steelers. See how that plays out because they passed on Quinton Mitchell to get that interior offensive lineman. Then they were able to come back in round 2 and get their center, and then get Mason McCormick in round 4. Who, you know, is a prototypical Steelers type of blocker, Steelers type of pick. So that'll be interesting contrast to watch over the next couple of years. I talked before about how, you know, the Ravens, they're a team that needs a few pieces, yet every year they pull off an outstanding draft. You got to love what the Kansas City Chiefs did. I mean, this is why the Ravens and the Chiefs are competing for titles or winning titles every year. I mean, the Chiefs flip-flop with Buffalo and then take Xavier Worthy when everyone and their mother thought that the Buffalo Bills were going to take Xavier Worthy for themselves. I mean, just to add another lethal threat down the field. He doesn't have to be a number 1 receiver. You line him up in the slot. You put him in motion before the snap of the ball. You line him up back off the line of scrimmage. You know what he did at the combine, and he plays to that speed. Talked about Sue Mataya. I thought getting Jared Wiley in the 4th round was great value. A developing tight end who, when Travis Kelce eventually retires, which is probably going to be sooner rather than later, you could stick him right in. Hunter Norzad, who they selected in the 5th round. Hunter Norzad's going to make their active roster this year as a backup interior offensive lineman and will eventually take over to be the Kansas City Chiefs starting center. I think Kamal Hayden was also a real good pick in the 6th round, has a high upside, excellent size, good athlete, had an injury last year, which really, stunted his development and pushed him down. And listen, when was the last time we saw a Tennessee player who was pushed deep in the draft because of an injury, because of medicals, that the Kansas City Chiefs selected and then went on to be an outstanding player?
And Tony, they had so many picks. You expect one of them to be a dud. I thought the Arizona Cardinals did a really nice job in this draft. Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, that goes without saying. Darius Robinson at 27, a big, versatile defensive end. They needed that. You thought Melton was a little high at 43. He was a little high for me, too. I had him, I think, in the high 50s on my board. But good player. Trey Benson around 3, I thought was good value for them. He'll be a good pairing with their power back Connor. He's more of a speed guy. We talked about how much we liked Isaiah Adams at the Senior Bowl as a 3rd-round pick. Tip Ryman, a blocking tight end that I think fits well next to Trey McBride with some upside as an athlete. Elijah Jones, a lot of people like him, the corner out of Boston College. And then I like Xavier Thomas in round 5. I know he's never met his potential and produced to that level at Clemson. He's an older prospect, but I think in round 5, it's worth the roll of the dice. We both like Christian Jones as a right tackle at the Senior Bowl. He's not the most athletic guy, but I think he's a chance to play in this league and be at worst a really good swing tackle. So I thought the Cardinals, given their high volume of picks, Tony, I think they did a pretty nice job. I didn't even mention Dadrian Taylor Demerson, the safety at a Texas Tech. So I think the Cardinals should be pretty happy with the draft haul that they walked away with.
You actually didn't mention Taywan Palmer out of UAB, who a lot of people don't know about. I mean, he was a guy we saw at the Shrine Bowl. He goes to 6'1.5", 210 pounds, ran a 4.45 during his pro day, and strained a hamstring during his pro day, which he had to stop. I mean, this is someone that no one's talked about. No one really focused on. I had mentioned that he was building momentum. I thought he was going to go in the 7th round. He ended up in the 6th round. Good for him. And that's a guy who I think can make the roster this year. I thought the Raiders did a terrific job. They basically, I think they had to regroup when the Falcons surprised everybody and took Michael Penix. So they regroup, and what do? They get a playmaker at tight end. They get a guy that's going to be another reliable pair of hands for Derek Carr and Brock Bowers. And I think playing indoors in Vegas is really going to benefit Bowers as just a terrific pass-catching tight end who can get down the field, go over the middle, and he's a solid blocker. We talked about Jackson Powers Johnson earlier. I think DJ Glaze in round 3 may surprise people, but there's a lot of love for Glaze in the scouting community. He played left and right tackle at Maryland. I think he's a guy who's going to compete for the right tackle job, could kick into guard. DeCamerion Richardson of Mississippi State, a big, tall, athletic corner in the Raiders mold, has a lot of upside, needs a little work on his game. But again, a year down the road, you're looking at a potential starting corner. Tommy Eichenberg in round 5, tough, nasty, bit athletically limited, but he's got great instincts and he's constantly flying around the ball. And then Dylan Laub in round 6, the running back, pass catcher out of the backfield, return specialist out of New Hampshire, who had a terrific Senior Bowl, ran well at the combine. I mean, you're sort of Swiss Army knife, as you like to say, at the skill positions. You can use him as a situational running back. You can use him as a 3rd down back out of the backfield. You can line him up in the slot. And with the change in the return rules, I think Dylan Laub will do a good job as a return specialist for the Raiders this year.
All right, I'll throw one more at you, Tony, and I'm probably all maybe I'm being overly positive, but I had a lot of drafts that I really liked this year. I thought teams did a nice job. Bucks, I thought Graham Barton at 26 is a really good pick. Chris Braswell at 57, I thought is a good value pick. They had 2 3rd-round picks, got one of our favorites, Jalen McMillan, Tyke Smith, who's a plug-and-play nickel, and then Bucky Irving in round 4, who I think is a really nice running back in the passing game that'll really complement Rashad White pretty well. So I thought the Bucks, they didn't have any. They had one extra 3rd in this draft. They didn't have their 5th. I thought they did a pretty nice job.
Yeah, I'll go with one more as well. I thought the New Orleans Saints filled needs with good players. You know, they take Fuaga with the 14th pick, going to be a starter at right tackle. I'm sure they would have rather had Fashanu as a left tackle because Jared Penning has not worked out there. Uh, but now they'll be, you know, you'll have a starting right tackle, Fuaga. You don't know when or if Ryan Ramczyk is coming back. Kool-Aid McKistry at the top of round two. I think he's a starter. I've said nothing but good things about McKistry. Obviously, he's fallen because of the Jones fracture, but once he gets healthy, he's going to be a dynamite player. They take Spencer Rattler in round 5. I had him as a 4th rounder. A lot of people thought when those first 6 quarterbacks came off the board within the first 12 picks, the happiest guy on the face of the earth was Spencer Rattler because he was going to hop into day 2. Didn't happen for obvious reasons, but he's got a tremendous amount of upside. Jalen Ford, the tough, instinctive linebacker from Texas, had hernia surgery right after his pro day, but he's a guy who I think can play inside. He could play outside. He'll start off as a rotational player, could eventually develop into a starter. And then they come away with Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa, the big defensive tackle that we saw dominate Shrine Bowl practices in the 6th round. He's got some technical things that he's got to work on. Boyd tends to play a little bit too high at times, must do a better job consistently playing with leverage, but he's 6'2", he's 320 pounds, he's quick, he's explosive, he's strong, and he's got an upside.
Yeah, and you know what the heck? I'll do one more just because I think they deserve the credit. Packers, Jordan Morgan, 1st round, good pick. Adrian Cooper, 2nd round, good pick. Javon Bullard, 3rd round, good pick. Marshawn Lloyd, 4th round, good pick. I just think when you have 4 straight good picks at positions of need, I think you got to tip your cap to them as well. All right, Tony, we kind of already focused a lot on the Falcons and the Penix decision in our last episode. If you guys want to hear about that, you can go back and talk about that. They also traded up for, a row who we thought was a little bit early. So I think both of us weren't thrilled with what the Falcons did. Anyone else jump out to you in terms of drafts that maybe could use a little improvement?
I'll go number 1 with the Carolina Panthers. I mean, based on the fact that they gave away the 1st round pick this year, they got Bryce Young, who did not play, as well as CJ Stroud. I think that's one in the loss column. And then they move up 1 spot to get Xavier Legette. I don't understand that move. He would have been there. I don't think Buffalo's taken Xavier Legette with that last pick in round 1, which they acquired. They could have sat there rather than give away a pick because this team needs a lot of players. Jonathan Brooks at pick 14 in the 14th pick of round 2. I like Jonathan Brooks, but the guy's coming off a knee injury. I think that was just very early for him. I think for a team that needs a lot of help and basically went in this with the bad optics of trading away the 1st pick of the overall of the entire event, I don't think they did a good job at all.
All right, I'm going to throw out the Patriots, Tony,
Yeah.
because I thought that Drake May was a good pick. You know, we all like Drake May. I'm a huge fan of his, and you know what? If he's going to work out, nobody, frankly, is really going to care about the other moves the Patriots made in this draft. So I understand that, but I mentioned I thought Jalen Polk's a little bit early. You mentioned you thought Caden Wallace was a little bit early. I thought Layden Robinson in round 4 was a little bit early. I thought the best pick was Javon Baker. Frankly, Tony, I'll be honest with you. I had Javon Baker ranked ahead of Jalen Polk on my board in round 4. So I thought that was actually a really, really good pick. And then they got Marcellus Dial and Joe Milton a little bit later on. But for a team that had so many holes to fill and I think really needed some needle movers in this draft, I don't see many on the list of players that they drafted.
They seem to have this affection for slow receivers because Jalen Polk is a slow receiver. He's a good pass catcher, but he's a slow receiver. Javon Baker is a slow receiver. They don't seem to want to put any speed on the field, which is kind of ironic because Drake May is a solid vertical passer.
I heard, Tony, they actually tried to draft N'Keal Harry again, but the league wouldn't let them. No. Any other teams that maybe you weren't such a big fan of?
No, I thought the Jets did a good job with the 10th pick. I thought they did a good job with the 3rd round pick, taking the receiver from Western Kentucky. And then all they did was just trade down, trade down, trade down today. It's like, they wanted to have complete control of the late fifth, early sixth round. Eventually, you got to select players. And then they took Jordan Travis, the quarterback out of Florida State, which was, they took him in the fifth round, which to me was very surprising. I don't think even when he's a healthy player, he's worth a fifth rounder. Very good college player, RPO type of quarterback, but he reminded me of Taj Boyd in the sense that when he throws the ball, you just don't know where it's going to end up. A lot of those great catches that Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson were making was because Travis could not put the ball, where it needed to be.
Yeah, and then the Texans didn't have a first round pick, Tony, and I think they made a good trade to get that value out of the Vikings. They'll have an extra, second round pick next year, which I think was a good trade for them. They got Lassiter. I thought Blake Fisher in round 2 for me was a little bit rich. At pick 27 in round 2, I had more of a third, fourth round grade on him. And then both of us love Kalen Bullock as a ball hawk, right? As your free safety that's going to be rangy and read the quarterback and get picks. I went back and I watched his film again last week, and man, the tackling is just such a problem, Tony. I wonder about him as the 14th pick in the third round ahead of a guy like Jaden Hicks. I get it. Cade Stover in round 4 is fine. Then they pick Jamal Hill and Jawar Jordan. Jordan is a running back I know a lot of people like out of Louisville in round 6. But I know they didn't have a ton of capital, but the Texans draft didn't necessarily move me.
The only thing I'll say about Bullock is he's got a defensive head coach there, which I think will whip him into shape as far as the tackling is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tony. Before we say goodbye, any other teams, players, concepts, final thoughts on the draft that you want to bring up?
No, I mean, there were a few surprises. I think, obviously Atlanta set the tone, taking Michael Penix. But after that, except for a few players here and there, there wasn't anything crazy. It'll be interesting. We'll have to wait and see how these turns out. We talk about what we like, what we don't like, and it's just all on paper right now. The fun will start this summer, this season, and 2 or 3 seasons down the road.
Yeah, I'll just throw a couple other teams out there. So if we have fans of those teams listening to us, they got a little bit of a mention here. You mentioned the Jaguars. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is a good fit. After that, I like the Jordan Jefferson, Javon Foster late. Broncos, we mentioned Bo Nixon and Troy Franklin together. I think that'll be a fun combination. The Lions did a nice job, I thought, Tony, getting Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. Then they went a little nuts late trading picks in future years to move up to draft some international guys. I thought was a little odd. But I love the Arnold and Rakestraw picks for them. Colts, Latu Latu and A.D. Mitchell with their first 2 picks. Tanner Bortolini a little bit later. And Macklin Calvas, frankly, Tony, I think as a developmental guy at tackle who missed this year with injury, I think was a pretty good pick too. And then, I talked about the Steelers kind of leaning into their play style. The Dolphins as well, right? What are the Dolphins built around? Speed. So they draft the fastest edge rusher they could find in Chop Robinson, and then the fastest running back they could find in Jalen Wright, and put him on the field. So I thought they kind of drafted to their style as well. So those are the teams that I just wanted to mention that we hadn't, that I thought did a pretty good job.
One last team, we talked about Tavondre Sweat with the Titans, but taking J.C. Latham with the 7th pick, I mean, this is a boom or bust type of draft. J.C. Latham, I've talked about my concerns about him with the weight, with the size. Evan Neal was taken. What was Evan? Was Evan Neal's the 6th pick of the draft? So, so basically the same area. I think those are some risky picks. Jarvis Brownlee in the 5th round, solid player, but still I thought there were better cornerbacks. I mean, I see the potential with Latham, with Sweat, Cedric Gray, Jarvis Brownlee, but I also see a lot of risk in those selections.
700 pounds worth of players, Tony, with those first 2 picks.
And I don't mind it on the defensive line, but an offensive tackle, it's a red flag to me.
Tony, this has been fun. We got through the whole year. It's always good. We'll have one more episode coming up in a week, talking about Tony's watch list for next year, so we can do some summer scouting. So we're ready to go when we come back in August. I know you're taking a little vacation. Enjoy that time off, folks. This will be our podcast for this week. Make sure you tune into it and check it out. Leave that 5-star positive rating on Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple Podcast. And check out, if you're a Giants fan, our other Giants podcasts as well, like the Giants Huddle Podcast, Big Blue Kickoff Live, and all those other episodes. We appreciate you being with us throughout this process. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. This has been Draft Season, which is brought to you by Moody's. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Visit Moody's.com to learn more. We'll see you next week, everybody.